So, welcome to Three Strategies to Make Coaching and Feedback Easier. I am now more convinced than ever, and this will be a little repetitive from a Wednesday workshop lesson we did, I think about 2, 3 weeks ago. And I often think about feedback in organizations or coaching, from a directional standpoint. We have the downward, right? The boss to subordinate. We have peer-to-peer coaching where we have fears of giving each other feedback, or we feel hesitant or inhibited because we really don't have the title of leader yet. Yet one area that we don't talk about, and I actually wrote an article years ago called Coaching Upward. I wrote it with Lori Freifeld at Training Magazine, a great editor, by the way. And we wrote an article together about how to coach upward, how to give feedback. And one of the best things that you can do when you give feedback upward is to ask for permission. And so I also think about feedback and coaching as something that we bestow upon our leaders, right? They're the provider. The person getting coached is the receiver. As corny as that sounds and as trivial as that sounds, it's really the direction that typically occurs. Yet the one thing we don't talk about is, leaders today, if you have a leader with, let's say, 5 employees, and that leader's got to give feedback and coaching to all 5, they are typically doing it in a downward fashion. Now, I'm going to get a little cynical. When you think about feedback, every time I ask this question, I've repeated this a million times in the last 28 years of doing this, is we tend to give feedback that we see or that we're triggered to fix or correct something, right? And so when I think about that, I think about how do we reverse that trend? We work with leaders, we practice with them, and it's, we encourage them to be strength-based. And I think there's a lot of companies doing that, and certainly including us. Yet I'm wondering, what would happen to a leader if an employee, let's just call her Lisa, comes in and says, Charlie, I was just thinking about where I'm at, and I hope you don't mind. I would love to spend some time with you. Would you identify 3 areas where you feel like I'm improving, where I'm performing well? And what's that one area you would love, or what you've perceived where I have an opportunity to raise my game? Seems corny, right? Something magical happens. And I'm about to give you a great story here in a bit. Something magical happens. What happens is this, is that we've actually now made it easy for the leader to approach the employee. Why? Because they don't have to approach them. Number 2, the employee, if taught correctly, has now structured the feedback for the leader. They don't even have to think. It's the same thing we do from leader to employee. Let me give you an example. Let me reverse it for you. So if I go up to Lisa and say, what are you going to do? What are 2 things you're going to do to positively engage with Charlie? That's a self-actualized question. She's going to react positively because I've used a technique called framing. The same principle applies where she's saying, where are 3 areas where I'm performing well? And what's that one area where I could raise my game? Notice the verbiage, raise my game. Not where I should dreadfully run my head into a wall because I should be grossly disappointed in myself. And so when you do that, something magical happens. So what we do is we drive the reception upward, okay? The second thing we do is when we seek feedback, we've made it someone above us a lot more palatable and easier for them to give. So I want to give you a 30-day experiment we did with a client of ours. And I'm going to annotate one of my toughest clients I've ever had. And, I always say the term, yeah, but Bob. This is yeah, but Betty. So it's a female version to Bob. And every time you talk to her, yeah, but you can just tell her rebuttaling. You can tell she's going to rebuttal. So I gave her once a week, one exercise. She had to seek feedback and drive reception upward. And what she had to do is ask for, where am I performing well? What are 3 areas? What's that one area where I could raise my game? I knew the people she was going to, and I said, you are not allowed to respond to the feedback. It is thank you. I appreciate the insight. That's it. Now, much like when we teach feedback reflective coaching, it's the same thing. We're just reverse engineering it. And a leader says, well, what if they say something to me and I call them in for these listening chats and they hear something that I don't agree with? I said, swallow a cup of blood, bite your tongue, put a mask on, put a helmet on. Don't respond, because don't call people into the office only to have them hear rebuttal from you, because they're never going to want to come back in again. The same thing happens when the employee seeks the feedback. She said, okay, well, what do I do after that? I said, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to journal. After every set of feedback, you're going to go sit somewhere for 5 minutes and you are going to write down the feedback, what you learned, what you're going to do to address that feedback successfully and positively. You're going to journal it. You're going to send it to me at the end of 30 days. 4 sessions, 5 to 7 minutes. The journaling, 60 to 70 seconds. Email it to me, 30 seconds. So what I did is I didn't tell her this, a little bit of a blind study, and she wasn't happy with me, but I know her really well. So then what we did is we had assigned the same methodology, the same progression, and we had everybody come into the room and we asked them 2 questions. We went around the room by asking for feedback and not rebuttaling, honestly, going around the room. What's one thing you learned about yourself that you're committed to positively changing and improving? Number 2, what positive action steps are you going to take going forward based on this activity that you went through? Let me go back to the first question. What have you learned about yourself that you're positively committed to improving? Every person in the room gave some annotation of, I need to listen. I need to be in a frame of mind. Now, keep in mind, they structured the feedback. We gave them a script, not constructive feedback. We asked for feedback of opportunities to raise our game. They all said it was easier to get because we were in control. The mindset of just having to listen prepared us to not rebuttal. And then the next question, what action steps are you going to take going forward? Every person in the room, we had them write it on a note card. Every person wrote down, I'm going to continue doing this. And they have. See, our relationship with things is really critical. So when you take somebody like myself, and I'm very comfortable with feedback, I'm very comfortable with especially conflict. I actually like conflict. I think it's healthy. Yet if I have a conversation with someone who doesn't have that relationship, that's like oil and water, at least on paper, right? That's tough. So often when we get leaders calling people into the office, and typically it's constructive feedback, guess what happens? You know, I've said this before and I've made this joke. So often we have people doing this. And I tell leaders, and I just did this in a workshop, we have people doing this saying, yeah. I said, are you convinced? And I said this to a group of leaders in a workshop. I said, are you convinced they're agreeing with you? They're nodding off. They want to get the heck out of that room. And they all started laughing. And so when you think about feedback and coaching, what if it was driven from the foundation of the major community inside your organization, which are individual contributors? There are more employees and individual contributors than there are leaders. That is typically of every company. What if we arm them of how to do it? So we have actually done something here where we have actually created an online platform called the 33 series. And I think the titles are attitude, motivation, feedback, communication, conflict, and teamwork. And all 6 have 3-part series, 30 minutes or less. They take it, and one of the things we do is we have them take these lessons. They fill out a PDF. What did you learn? What did you learn about yourself, etc. They turn that in. So now there's a commitment, right? There's a commitment to being a better teammate. There's a commitment to better attitude. And then we have them do these feedback progressions. It is the coolest thing in the world to watch people start to create a more healthy relationship with this process. Now, yeah, but Betty, the one I was alluding to, I said, how did you feel the first 2 or 3 times? She said, I hated it all the way up to the 4th time. I said, okay, I should appreciate your candor. What have you honestly learned? She goes, oh, I need to do it. It's my issue, she said. And it was so cool to see her do this. And I go, you want to go into leadership, right? You were in leadership in the manufacturing side. You're now going into the office. You want to become a leader again down the road, potentially, right? She said, oh, yeah. I said, the feedback is more frequent there. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, you're on a manufacturing line. People aren't pulling you off the line to give you feedback. We typically wait till break. That's why so much of the feedback you got was constructive, because we don't have a lot of time to give that feedback. And she said, yeah, you're right. I said, so how are you going to continue to do this? So pulls out a notebook, shows it to me. She bought her own notebook. She goes, I'm going to continue this. She said, it was tough at first, but I'm starting to get used to it. Dare I say, I'm starting to like it a little bit more. So The three strategies, again, is around the concept of driving coaching and feedback upward. How do we seek feedback? Journaling does a wonderful thing. One, it embeds reflection. Two, it embeds ownership, because when you write things down, you tend to remember it more. And then three, we've created a community. We call them pods, but we get people together talking about the experiences. And what we're really doing is creating a cadence. We're creating a progression of a sense of momentum to have positive feedback, right? And so what's so interesting is, I'm going to use one of my stupid volleyball analogies, okay? Some of my clients are so sick of my volleyball stories, but for 30 some years, I've been coaching volleyball on and off. And I would do this with varsity players. I would do this with my club players. I would say, you need to, the best thing you can do is ask your coach. I never told him to do it. Ask your coach where you're playing well and where do you have an opportunity to improve. And what I was doing, especially with kids who are 12 and 13, that's a daunting task. They just want to go have fun and play. They don't want to get feedback from a coach, even though they know they're going to get it. And so I'll never forget, I had a kid who was one of my favorite kids. His name was Nick. I don't think he played high school, but I had him. His parents were just two of the greatest people, pulled back, let us do our jobs. And there's no doubt that this kid wasn't a great athlete. And I remember he came up to me once and he said, Coach, I know I'm not very good. Where do you think I need to improve? I said, no, Nick, you forgot the first question. He said, I forgot it. I said, we wrote it out for you. Go get it. He came back, and the three questions he was supposed to ask, or the three things he was supposed to get, was, where are my three strengths? I said, let me address those first, Nick. You are the ultimate teammate. You always think about people beyond you. That will serve you the rest of your life. Number two, you are always cheering when you're on the bench or when you're on the court. Yet as a bench player, see, I hate the term bench player, Nick. I love bench advocate, an advocate for the guys on the court. And third, you work your butt off. You work, excuse my language, you work your ass off. Now, as I'm doing this is a really sensitive kid. And tears welled up in his eyes. And I said, I'm sorry, Nick, did I embarrass you? He goes, no, I usually don't get feedback like this. And his voice was cracking. I said, now, here's the cool thing. Here's where your opportunity is to raise your game, man, and it's going to be awesome. Notice what I did. Raise your game. It's going to be awesome. He said, what's that? I said, get to the ball quicker. Athletically, you're not going to improve in the next week. You'll improve. Don't worry about that. But I want you to think about anticipation. Next match, he's getting to the ball. This kid is just getting it. Now, I kept creating a community of learning up. So we get into a timeout, and I said, anybody notice what Nick is doing? This kid, Nate, who now is a great high school player, turns to him and goes, you're getting to the ball so much quicker. Guess what happened to this kid's confidence? Went through the roof. So years later, after club, his mom came to our high school where I was coaching varsity. And I'm like, oh, is Nick here? And she goes, Timmy's sick. I'm like, oh, I wanted to see him so bad. She goes, Tim, he was so looking forward. He had like strep throat, and he told us, I want to go see Coach Hagan. Now, I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal, but I go back to that moment where feedback was a tool. I got that feedback embedded in his head. See, first he came for the constructive. Isn't that interesting that people seek also the constructive, yet it's also the thing that we perceive leaders always provide first? Structure the feedback upward. Where are the three areas where I'm performing well? What's that one area where I have an awesome opportunity to raise my game? Give people that language. Good things will happen. Create a sequence of doing that. Create a reflection activity, whether it's journaling or sharing or putting something online. Third, create a community of employees. Now, I'm going to give you a sales pitch. If you're intrigued by the 33 series, we're about to launch some employee coaching pods that does exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not going to get into it detailed. Email me or message me on LinkedIn. But when you create a community, here's the funny thing. Now, this is going to come off cynical. I have a view of employees. Now, it's very jaded. There are three types of employees. And I don't think there's any middle ground. I think there's gray area, especially by the annotation of one of the types of employees. Number one, we have players. Players are out on the field. Their heads are down. They're running the plays. Okay. Number two, we have bleacher people. They sit in the bleachers. They complain about the things going on in the field. Maybe they don't complain about the players, but they just complain, right? They're at the water cooler. We'll just call them bleacher people. The third type of people are fencers. They're straddling the fence. Do I want to go on the field? Looks like a lot of work. Over my shoulder, I'm looking at the people in the bleachers. They don't move a lot. That looks kind of relaxing. And all they do is complain. That doesn't seem too hard. Now, that seems cynical and jaded. Here's the challenge. Can he argue it? Every time we implement our coaching, everyone says, oh, our industry is different and what we do is different and blah, blah, blah. Guess what everyone brings up? Attitude, motivation, teamwork, communication, collaboration. It's all this top stuff. So when you have those three types of people, keep in mind when you have players who are out in the field and their heads are down running the plays, they're not looking up in the stands to say, we need to recruit fencers. They ignore the bleacher people. The bleacher people are recruiting. Now, we talk about the elephant in the room, right? So the elephant in the room, sadly, has some really good power here. So we want to be careful. So if you're intrigued by this, think about creating an employee community of positivity, an employee community that seeks and accepts feedback readily, professionally, thoughtfully, openly. Wouldn't we be in a better place to retain talent, build future leaders, create emerging leader programs? Emerging leader programs, not just based on something they're trying to achieve, but also the program actually receives behaviors that are in congruence of feedback and coaching. So if you're intrigued by that, reach out to us. The last thing I wanted to share with you is language is important. So when you structure language, I would tell you conversations are now needed. Conversational excellence, conversational skills are needed now more than ever. And so when you think about the words, where do I have an opportunity to raise my game is much different than what's some constructive feedback you could give me. See, what happens is language creates an emotional trigger. Let me give you another narrative of that. If I bring in Lisa and I said, Lisa, I'm really getting pissed off. She doesn't hear anything after the word or the words pissed off. What she hears is, I'm in trouble. I'm emotionally spinning. Oh my God, what's going to happen next? Because it's an emotional trigger. Now, if I say, Lisa, one of the things I wanted to share with you, here are the three areas where I think you're performing well, A, B, and C. And I think about time management and coming to work on time and having that become one of your strengths. What goes through your mind? Even the language helps me have a more positive tone in my voice. Language matters. Let me give you 6 words. We share opportunity, perspective, observation, and leave your butts at home. Language triggers. Our approaches trigger. If we can teach them to approach us as leaders and we're having our own feedback structured for us, do you know something interesting that's happening? The employees, by being taught this methodology, are actually helping leaders cultivate their own feedback and coaching skills. Cool. Do me a favor. Put something into the chat. Share with us what you liked, what you disliked. I hope this makes sense to you. We're going to keep harping on this because these Wednesday workshops are really designed to teach new and innovative techniques as it relates to coaching and feedback. Thanks for your time.